Failing and being a failure are two separate and distinct things. One of the things we learned about the adaptive cycle and the life cycle is that all living things and all living systems will fail. Whether or not they are a failure is based upon whether or not they can reorganize to grow. Right? We have to get past this idea that failing is always the most horrible thing and must always be avoided at all costs. You know, if we try new things, we will fail sometimes. If we take a risk in order to do something wonderful or great, we might fail sometimes. Failure is part of a learning process. You know, the first time I tied my shoes, I did not do it right. I did it again until I got it. The first time I tried to button my shirt, I did not do it right. The first time I tried to write in cursive, thank God I grew up in the computer age. I didn't do it right. I got F's in penmanship in school. It's all about a learning process. We have to be willing to fail in order to grow. We know that because failure is intrinsic to the system, we need to learn how to let go and move on. One of the things that all of us do is in our life, when we get to that conservation phase, something worked for us so that we could grow the last time. And sometimes we hold on to it even when it's not helping us anymore, right? Many of us will develop unhealthy defense mechanisms that helped us survive something, maybe something traumatic at one point, but now are stopping us from learning or forming a healthier new relationship or what have you, right? At some point, what we've always been doing needs to give way so that we can risk and fail and learn and grow again. Being healthy helps us be resilient. We are learning that our emotions and our physical being are interconnected at cellular levels, right? Our body and mind and spirit all work together as a whole. If we are physically healthy and emotionally healthy and spiritually healthy, we will be more resilient. Asking for help helps us be resilient people. Asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, right? We need to be better at asking for help, and we need to be better at hearing requests for help. Sometimes people ask for help in ways we don't see because we're not paying attention. And sometimes we can think people are too needy because they keep asking for help. They might need it over and over again. So we got to love them over and over again. Having spiritual practices makes us resilient. And I define a spiritual practice as something you do with depth. You really get into it. You do it with intention. You do it on purpose. You do it with regularity, on schedule. It's a discipline. And you do it in service not only to yourself, but in service of something greater than yourself, so that you can be part of something bigger than you. For some people, that's God. For some people, that's a cause. For some people, that's getting a candidate elected. You know, it's different for all of us. But if we have those regular practices, when we need to call on them to get us through something, they'll be of more help than if we try to start them during a time of crisis. We want our children to be resilient. And some of the ways we can help them do that is to not hide difficult things from them. There are age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate ways to talk to your children about virtually anything. And hiding difficulty in the long run is not going to help. We need to work on our own stuff. If we don't manage our own emotions about failure and risk and asking for help and being healthy and having spiritual practices, we'll be less able to help our children develop resilience. We need to name joy. When we have fun, we don't point it out. We're great at saying, I felt awful. I was miserable. I'm sick. Few of us are really good at saying, I'm great, I'm having fun, this is a blast. When we're having fun with kids especially, we need to name that. This is joy. This is it. This is being alive right here. This is what we're doing. We need to do more of that. We need to make intentional community time for ourselves and our children. Having a supportive community of family and friends makes us more resilient. And as we learned from Andrew Zolli and other resilience researchers, faith makes us resilient. Holding on to that something greater than ourselves is positively adaptive. It's an evolutionary advantage, is what they're finding. Again, it doesn't matter if what you're holding on to is true, right? But people who have that are more resilient. And that doesn't need to be, if this is not you, it doesn't need to be God. It could be a cause, your deepest values. The 5 smooth stones of religious liberalism. What you hold on to beyond yourself helps get you through. And we know this. Also, to help raise resilient kids, we can teach them to do risky stuff. In my research for this sermon, I found one of my new favorite resources of all time. A book, 50 Dangerous Things You Should Let Your Kids Do. Easy for you to say, your kid's 23 now. The authors, Giver Tully and Julie Spiegler, recommend activities like walking a tightrope. I'm going to guess they recommend walking a tightrope like 4 inches off the ground, but walking a tightrope. Things like throwing a spear or a boomerang. Projects like melting glass. That's so cool. Experiences like sleeping outside and camping, right? And there's a whole bunch of others. I found their list fascinating.
It's an auction item.
So, to further illustrate what helps people be resilient, I need more volunteers. Come on, I need volunteers to help. No, you got to come up here because everyone's got to see all of these things. And everyone's got to help us make determinations about them. All right, so there's a basket of balls and other things here. Everybody needs to take 1 or 2 of them. See how many people we get up here. Oh, you're going for the big one. You got it. You got it. Oh, you go. Hold on. Oh. There's one. All right, we got a lot more in here. If you only have one, you can take another one. There's a whole bunch of them in here.
That is a weird one.
Oh, who needs one? All right, well, we'll get him. You got it. Way to go, dude. All right. Go on. Take one. That's resilience, man. I got it. I'm going. Cool. We went to this church. They gave us wiffle balls. I'm going back. All right. Anybody else? Here we go. You can have another one if you want. You can have 2. I don't know. So give it a shot anyway. It's not either. All right. All right. Who needs another one? Yep, it's weird. Anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Somebody needs the strawberry. There you go. All right. So what we're going to do, here you go. Oh, you got 2. All right, so one at a time, I'm going to ask each of you to stand up here with me. And you're going to hold up your thing. And all of you are going to tell us, is this bouncy or not bouncy? So what is this, bouncy or not bouncy?
Not bouncy.
You're right. What about this?
Bouncy.
Not bouncy. Okay, who's going to go next? You're going to go next? Can you hold up your ball? Bouncy or not bouncy?
Bouncy.
Yeah, a little bouncy. You want to got this one. What do you think? Bouncy or not bouncy? Yeah, a little bit. What do you have? All right, can you hold that up for everybody to see? Turn around so you can see it good. Bouncy or not bouncy?
Bouncy.
All right, let it go. Yep, bouncy. Now that big purple thing you got, hold that up. Bouncy or not bouncy? Not bouncy. Nope, not bouncy. What do you got? You got two of those. They're kind of the same. Want to hold them up both at the same time? Bouncy or not bouncy?
A little bit. Bouncy, lovely.
All right, let's see. Drop them to the floor. Let's see. Yeah, bouncy. You've got two tennis balls. Can you hold those up? Bouncy or not bouncy?
Bouncy.
Yeah. I think Roger Federer's been serving those all. All right. You got another tennis ball? What about this tennis ball? Bouncy? Yeah. And what's this big guy?
Bouncy.
All right. Not as bouncy as I thought. All right. You got a tennis ball? What do you think? Bouncy? Yeah. And what's this one? Plastic ball. Oh, not very bouncy. I thought that would be bouncier more. Yeah. What do you got, hon? What's that?
Marble.
A marble. She had a marble. Not bouncy? Not really. A little bit. What do we have back here?
What do you got, Ada? Want me to show it?
A softball.
What do you got? What's this one?
A
Squishy
softball.
Bouncy or not bouncy?
Bouncy or no?
No? No, not very
Not
bouncy.
really.
What do we have over here? A strawberry.
Not really.
Not really bouncy. What else we got over here? Another tennis ball. A squishy one. Bouncy. What do you got, Judith?
I got a soccer ball,
Soccer
but
ball.
not very much air in it.
All right, so
Not
not bouncy.
a little
Not
bit.
much bounce.
And another foul Schwartz ball.
Yeah.
no.
Not very bouncy. We got anything else left we didn't bounce? One more. Another tennis ball.
with a hole in it.
Uh-oh. Well, surprisingly bouncy. All right, so I got a question for everybody. What are some of the things that made the things bouncy or not bouncy? Air. So if something needed air, was inflated, it was more bouncy. If it needed air and wasn't, it was less bouncy. What else?
Too big.
They're
Rubber.
compressed.
Too big.
Compression. If something's dense and compressed, it has a little more bounce. You're saying this one's what?
Too big and
Too big and
extra weight.
too big and extra. This is floppy and dense, right? So that's going to affect the no bounce. It's heavy. What else affected whether or not something bounced?
Soft.
If it was really soft, sometimes it would not bounce. It would fall into the ground when it hit, right? What else did you notice?
Really hard.
Really hard, or something's really hard. And somebody, what's that? They are very soft
And harder in the inside.
and harder in the inside. So if we drop everything here on a rug, is that going to affect what bounces? Right? If we had dropped, say, the marble outside on the driveway, you think it would have bounced more?
Yes.
Yeah. So when we see all these things and their ability to bounce, get it? Bounce back, resilient. I'm so clever. But we notice it's just like people. What you're made of. How dense you are. Right? What your surrounding is. What the environment you're trying to bounce back in is. Right? Whether or not you have the resources you need. If you're a human, you have what humans need to thrive. Right? It is an interesting time to be a congregation. Right now, we are in a time of incredible systems collapse of church. Religion in the West is going through an incredible reorganization period. Right? Phyllis Tickle says this happens every 500 years. And we are going through a huge reorganization of how religion works in our culture in the West. Doug Padgett, a founding pastor of Solomon's Porch non-denominational church in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, says one of the reasons church is going through this time right now is most of the things we do at church, most of the resources we've conserved, worked in an environment that no longer exists. The American church grew up in an agricultural age, right? We had church one day a week because we can't take a lot of time off from farming. So we didn't. We centralized everything around the church in the center of town, and the fields were outside. And then the Industrial Revolution happened. And church in the Industrial Age was an Industrial Revolution church. The Industrial Revolution was all about how do we make more copies of the same product as fast and as cheaply as possible. Church did that too. We invented denominations. And their job was to stamp out as many copies of the type of church they were as they could and put them every place. And then the Industrial Age gave way to the Electronic Age. And we were able to do church with live TV and bands on stage, right? But now we are switching into what Paget calls a whole new age, and he calls it the Inventive Age. And he says the Inventive Age is a time where everything is going to be entrepreneurial to the core, open source, collaborative, non-hierarchical, permission granting. In his tradition, being a Christian, he says, time for new wine for the new wineskins, right? He says, the church that's going to come out, the religious model going to come out in the West after this period of reorganization may bear little resemblance to the denominational parish copies that were pumped out for the last couple hundred years. And so we need to remember, failure is intrinsic to a system. And we need to learn to practice all the things we can about being resilient. We need systems that are better, Zoli says, at seeing the emerging pathways. Where are things going next? We need to be better at recognizing and encouraging cooperation rather than division and constant competition. We see this in church all the time. That parish model church of the Industrial Age is, we don't want anyone to encroach on our particular group. We're our own congregation here. Yeah. And just like all those other congregations, we're falling into that release phase. What kills churches is not failure. Failure is intrinsic to the growth system. What kills churches is the inability to reorganize themselves. What kills churches is a lack of resilience. We hold on to things we do in church because they've worked for a long time. And they're not going to work all the time anymore. And we have a choice. We can either stubbornly hold on to them, that's the way we've always done it here, or we can let go on purpose and see what falls down, see what we got left, look around at our resources, collaborate with each other, get entrepreneurial, and reorganize so we can grow and thrive again. That's why I'm here. That's why we're engaged with this work with the congregation in Meriden. We need to do things that will foster resilience. We are going to be asking everyone in the congregation in the next coming weeks to participate in some congregational conversations where we do a little teaching, do a lot of listening, exchange some ideas, and try and get a group consensus of where we're going to go in our reorganization. We're going to take it as a given that going forward is not going to look like where we've been. It may be very different, right? It may be different in all kinds of ways we don't even know right now. And you know what? That's okay, because that's how we stay alive. And we have a great group of people here that are creative, that are themselves resilient and have lived through lots of hardship in your lives, right? We can do this. The first thing we have to remember is to not be afraid of the process. The more tightly we hold on to everything we've always done before, the harder it will be to release and reorganize our resources so that we can grow again. Right? We want a church that's vibrant and alive and thriving. And that may look different than the church that's vibrant and alive and thriving 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. That's okay. We need to take up change itself as a spiritual practice. We practice it with intention, not by default. We plan to let go of some things and plan to reorganize some things. We do it with intention, we do it with commitment, and we do it with a dedication to something bigger than ourselves, which is our future life. This might get scary for each of us in our own way. That's okay. That's required of the process. But I've learned something about us in my 6 months here. We are great at leaning on one another. So whatever we have to do to get through this leaning on one another, we will be able to do that. And I think it's an exciting time. And we can exploit an inherent reality about being a religious community. Having a faith in something makes you more resilient. If we believe in our Unitarian Universalism and it's something worth saving and promoting and making grow and thrive, let's hold on to that so it helps us reorganize and grow. And maybe most importantly, we need to deeply trust ourselves and our faith in Unitarian Universalism. Trust that this hope for a bright future is real. That reorganization and rebirth and revitalization are possible. And the first step in making that happen is practicing the resilient advantage of having faith that it is indeed possible. I invite you to ground yourself here, where you're sitting, time and place made holy by our being together. Be in the silence for a bit. Listen to the still small voice that calls up inside you in your heart and your spirit. Take part right now for a moment in that resilient behavior of the spiritual practice of sitting.
This has been a presentation of
The Mattatuck Unitarian Universalist Society.
Honoring the earth and all that is.
Learn more at MUUSCT.org or come by any Sunday. All are welcome.